There are people who walk gently through life. They keep their hearts tucked away, as though protecting something too delicate for the world to touch. To others, they seem calm, composed, self-contained. They rarely chase affection. They rarely reveal their inner world. They rarely step into closeness without hesitation. But beneath this quiet exterior lives a truth they rarely admit. Love is not something they dislike. It is something they fear. Not because love itself is painful, but because the turbulence that comes with it threatens the fragile peace they fought so hard to build. This is the story of the ones who love quietly but avoid openly. The ones who crave connection yet choose distance. The ones who understand tenderness deeply but refuse to risk the storm that often follows it. The silent instinct to step back. There is a moment when someone who avoids love feels the quiet urge to retreat. It does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself. It emerges like a shadow crossing the heart, a soft tightening in the chest, a subtle shift in breath, a warning from someplace deep within. It happens when someone looks at them too closely, when affection lingers a little too long, when attention feels too warm, too steady, too real. Their body recognizes the feeling before their mind names it. Something in them pulls back. Something whispers, "Be careful." The instinct is not dramatic. It looks like stillness, a pause in conversation, a sudden distance in the eyes, a change in tone so slight that others rarely notice. But inside, the inner world becomes louder. Their thoughts begin to move quickly. Their pulse rises. Their nervous system prepares for impact. Connection feels like exposure. Vulnerability feels like danger, and love feels like a wave that can knock them off balance. They do not dislike the person standing in front of them. They may even feel drawn to them. They may admire their warmth, their presence, their sincerity, but wanting someone and feeling safe with them are two different experiences. And for the ones who avoid love, safety wins every time. They retreat, not out of coldness but out of preservation. They have learned that affection opens doors to places within themselves they are not ready to revisit. Doors that hold old wounds. Doors that lead to parts of themselves they have kept quiet for years. Love threatens those barriers. Love asks for visibility. Love asks for surrender. Love asks them to trust someone else with the softness they have spent their entire life guarding. In this chapter, the beginning of avoidance becomes clear. It is not a rejection of love. It is a response to overwhelm, a protective reflex born from a deep understanding of how fragile their inner peace truly is. They avoid love not because they cannot feel it, but because they feel it too deeply to let it in without trembling. The roots beneath the the instinct to avoid love is not born in adulthood. It grows quietly in childhood, in the early rooms where affection felt unpredictable, in the moments when tenderness came with conditions, in the places where emotional safety was fragile or inconsistent. Some children grew up with caregivers who loved them, but only in ways that felt intense and unstable. Their home may have been filled with affection one day and withdrawn the next, warmth in the morning, coldness by night. In that unpredictability, the child learned that closeness could not be trusted. Love became something that felt comforting and frightening at the same time. Others grew up in environments where emotions were not spoken of, where feelings were dismissed or minimized, where expressing sadness was treated as weakness, where expressing fear was met with impatience, where expressing needs was labeled as attention-seeking. These children learned early that emotional vulnerability was dangerous terrain. That silence kept them safe. That distance was easier than explaining themselves to people who did not know how to listen. And then there are the ones who saw love collapse in front of them. Homes where conflict overshadowed affection, families where affection turned into obligation, relationships that taught them love is a battlefield rather than a refuge. They watched love shatter the people around them. They saw hearts break without warning. They witnessed how easily trust could be lost. And they vowed quietly that they would never let themselves be exposed to that kind of fragility. Some children simply loved too deeply for the world around them. They were sensitive, intuitive, aware. They felt everything with an intensity that overwhelmed even themselves. But their depth was not mirrored. Their tenderness was not matched. They learned that the more they cared, the more they hurt. And so, in order to survive their own emotional sensitivity, they learned to turn the volume down, to steady themselves by stepping away rather than stepping closer. These early lessons become patterns in adulthood. The child who protected their heart becomes the adult who avoids love, not because their heart is empty, but because it is full. too full for the unpredictable landscape of human intimacy. They distance themselves because they were trained from childhood that closeness comes with a cost they cannot afford. The psychology of self, PROTCTO. On to understand why someone avoids love, one must understand the psychology of self-protection. The brain is wired to seek safety before connection. People who avoid love are not cold. They are cautious. Their nervous system is calibrated around danger rather than desire. Their emotional patterns were built to preserve stability. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, becomes active when love approaches, not because love is harmful, but because vulnerability feels like danger. When someone tries to get close, the brain interprets it as risk of heartbreak, risk of disappointment, risk of losing control. The body responds with subtle defense mechanisms: emotional distance, shorter replies, avoiding eye contact, a sudden need for solitude. These responses are not choices, they are survival scripts. Attachment theory also plays a role. People who avoid love often fall into avoidant attachment patterns. This does not mean they do not care. It means caring feels unsafe. Their body associates closeness with overwhelm. Their mind equates vulnerability with loss. Their history taught them that relying on others leads to instability, and so they rely on themselves instead. Love becomes something they view from a distance, something they understand but do not touch. Their thoughts become protective barriers. They analyze affection until it loses its warmth. They question intentions before allowing hope to rise. They convince themselves that staying alone keeps the heart steady. They rehearse worst-case scenarios to prepare for disappointment. They distance themselves before someone has the chance to leave. Their mind creates safety through control, and love threatens that control. They may appear calm on the outside, but internally there is a constant negotiation between desire and fear, wanting affection while fearing its consequences, craving connection while avoiding its cost, feeling softness while hiding it beneath stoicism. This psychological balancing act becomes exhausting, but it is the only way they know how to stay intact. Avoiding love is not emotional emptiness. It is emotional overload managed through distance. It is the brain's best attempt to keep the heart from collapsing under the weight of its own sensitivity. The war between longing and PAC inside those who avoid love lives a quiet war, a longing for connection and a longing for peace, both equally strong, both equally sacred. But when forced to choose, peace wins, not because it brings joy, but because it brings stability. Peace is something they can control. Love is not. They want to be understood. They want to be held. They want someone to see the softness they hide from the world. They yearn for the kind of closeness that feels safe enough to rest in. But with that longing comes fear. Fear of losing themselves. Fear of losing their balance. Fear of repeating past wounds. Fear of being seen too deeply. Fear of depending on someone who might not stay. Their longing pulls them forward. Their fear pulls them back. Their heart says, reach out. Their mind says, retreat. Their emotions rise like waves. Their self-preservation cuts them short. This inner conflict becomes a lifelong pattern. They give in small doses. They love in quiet ways. They express affection indirectly. But when feelings grow too strong, they retreat. Not to punish the other person, not to test them, but to protect themselves from the storm they expect to follow. They prefer controlled environments, predictable rhythms, stable emotional landscapes. Love is none of these. Love disrupts. Love awakens. Love demands presence. Love shakes the walls they built around their heart. And yet, they care deeply, deeper than most people realize. They love silently, from a distance that feels safe. They remember small details. They notice subtle expressions. They feel emotions intensely but show them cautiously. They crave connection but avoid the vulnerability that connection requires. This war inside them is not visible to others. It plays out in the quiet moments, in the pauses before replies, in the subtle withdrawal from affection, in the way their voice softens when they are afraid, in the way they vanish when emotions become too heavy. The tragedy is not that they avoid love. The tragedy is that they think avoiding love is the only way to survive their own depth. The moment love breaks THROG, despite their resistance, there comes a moment when something or someone breaks through their defenses, a moment when love becomes harder to avoid, not because it becomes easier, but because it becomes undeniable. The breakthrough may come from kindness, a gentle presence that does not push, someone who listens without demanding, someone who notices their fear without criticizing it. someone who understands their silence without misinterpreting it. This quiet acceptance softens the walls around their heart. Sometimes the breakthrough comes from loneliness, the realization that distance has kept them safe, but also disconnected. That peace without connection becomes emptiness. That solitude without intention becomes sorrow. They feel the ache they have been holding back, and that ache cracks their defenses. Sometimes the breakthrough comes from exhaustion. They grow tired of analyzing every feeling, tired of managing their emotions alone, tired of avoiding tenderness they secretly crave. Avoidance stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like imprisonment. Sometimes the breakthrough is unexpected, a conversation that feels too honest, a moment of vulnerability that catches them off guard, a surge of emotion they cannot suppress. Love arrives quietly. It does not ask permission. It simply rises. In these moments, something inside them stirs. Something recognizes that connection is not always chaos, that affection does not always destabilize, that love can be gentle, patient, understanding. They begin to question the walls they built. They begin to sense that safety might exist, not only in solitude but also in softness. This chapter marks the turning point, the moment when their heart whispers maybe, the moment when avoidance pauses long enough for tenderness to enter. The soft practice of letting love in, does not happen suddenly for people who avoid it. It happens slowly, in small moments, in gentle steps. They do not leap, they inch forward. Their heart moves cautiously, testing the ground beneath each step. They start by allowing themselves to feel small emotions without retreating, letting warmth settle in their chest, letting affection remain present instead of pushing it away, letting themselves enjoy connection without analyzing it. They practice staying in conversations that feel intimate, staying emotionally present even when they feel overwhelmed, staying open when the instinct is to close, staying soft when the instinct is to harden. They begin to express themselves, quiet truths at first, then fuller ones. They learn to say they are afraid. They learn to say they are overwhelmed. They learn to say they care. These admissions feel risky, but they also feel freeing. They begin to trust their voice, trust their worth, trust that their presence will not cause harm, trust that someone can hold their depth without drowning, trust that peace is not lost when love enters. It changes shape, but it remains. They discover that love is not a storm when it is met with gentleness. It is not a loss of control when met with boundaries. It is not chaos when it is shared with someone steady. They learn to navigate connection with care instead of avoidance. They learn to regulate their emotions rather than run from them. They learn to let someone in without letting themselves go. This chapter captures the slow awakening of the heart, the careful re-entry into closeness, the soft rebuilding of trust, the freedom to love without losing PHSE. In the final chapter, something profound emerges. They discover a truth they never allowed themselves to believe. Love does not have to destroy their peace. It can coexist with it. It can even deepen it. They learn that peace is not found in isolation. It is found in emotional safety. They learn that love is not a threat when met with clarity. They learn that vulnerability is not collapse when met with understanding. They learn that connection can be grounding rather than destabilizing. They begin to trust that they can love without losing themselves. They begin to see that they can stay open without falling apart. They begin to feel that tenderness does not threaten their balance. It strengthens it. They discover that the heart is not fragile. It is resilient. It can hold sadness and joy, fear and longing, peace and love, all at once. They no longer avoid love out of fear. They move toward it with awareness. They understand their patterns. They understand their needs. They understand their boundaries. They understand their depth. The dark side of avoiding love becomes the light side of choosing it carefully, choosing it gently, choosing it with intention, choosing it with the understanding that love does not ask them to sacrifice their peace. It asks them to share it. The story ends with a quiet truth. Avoidance was never about rejecting love. It was about protecting a wounded heart. And now, with understanding, that heart learns that it is safe to feel, safe to hope, safe to open, safe to love, and safe to stay.